The great Gadol Ador of Aaron Leib Steinman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was once asked, why is it that in order to be fulfilling the mitzvah of tzedakah properly, it's so hard? It comes so hard for certain people to go and fulfill this mitzvah. Why is it that it's so hard? And he told them that, I once spoke to the Chazon Ish about this specific shaila, and the Chazon Ish told me like this. He said that the Gemara in Yuma on Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis says that by the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, there was a specific Yetzer Hara in those days to go and transgress the Aveira of Avodah Zarah, to worship, to idol worship. Terrible Aveira. But then the Chachamim saw that it was too hard for the Yidden to overcome this Nisayon. They couldn't overcome it. They had such a desire to go and worship this Avodah Zarah. So the Chachamim were mevatel such a gezerah, such a terrible thing that was falling on Klal Yisrael, and they took it away. There was no longer a Yetzer Hara to go and worship these things. The Yetzer Hara was gone. But of course, the Yetzer Hara can never go to sleep. He's always working, especially overtime. So the Chazon Ish told him that at that point came out as a different Yetzer Hara. It's true the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah was gone. But there was a new Yetzer Hara that came about, and that was the Yetzer Hara for worshipping our money. He told him that the Yetzer Hara that was created at that point was that of somebody who tries to go to people and show them that their money is almost like Avodah Zarah. They worship it, and they can't part themselves from it, and therefore, Klal Yisrael is faced with a new nisayon, a new test, something which makes it not easy for us to go and look at our wealth. How exactly do we view it? Do we view it as something which is almost like an Avodah Zarah, that we love it and we can't get rid of it? Or we know that it's just a form of a matana from Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives everybody different opportunities, like we mentioned in the past. Certain people have certain schusim, and because of that, they're blessed with certain wealth, and when they have any son, whether or not they could part from it, so it's something which b'siyata d'shmaya they could do when they are mizgaber, which is something that of course we all need help from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to constantly help us every day. Now, being with all this introduction that we started also last week in the introduction shir, now we're holding over here in the first shir of the halachas of Hilchos Tzedakah, so I figured that it was important and for sure proper to go and start according to the way the Seder of the Shulchan Aruch, like we've done in the past in Hilchos Kivud Aveim, over here in Yoredeya, Siman Reish Mem Zayin. The first discussion we have to go and talk about exactly that comes up every day is what exactly are the parameters of this chiyuv of tzedakah. What I mean to say is that the first halacha which is brought down in Shulchan Aruch in the halachas of Hilchos Tzedakah brings out the famous lavim in the Torah, the different things that a person can transgress when a poor person comes over and asks you for tzedakah. So we're not discussing how much you have to give. Let's say we're talking about even the basic amount, whatever it is today, if it's 10 cents, if it's a quarter, if it's $1, whatever it is. But a real ani comes to you, a real person who is poor, no fakes, no games, and he comes to you and asks you for money. He comes to your shul, he comes in the middle of davening. What is the basic halacha? Does the person have to go and give him? If he doesn't give him, is he transgressing something? So it's true that when you open up in the Shulchan Aruch, like I said, and you look in the first sif, so we see that there's a lav in the Torah. It says over here, that a person is not allowed to go and remove himself from the obligation that he has in front of him right now, that a poor person came and asked him for tzedakah. And he also can't tighten his fist when a poor person comes. And if he does so, then he's transgressing an Aveira. Chaval. So the question is, every time a person comes to me, I have to go and give them, and if I don't, I have to be worried that I'm transgressing an Aveira. And I will explain that, of course, it's not exactly that intense. Of course, there's a great schar, like we mentioned, for somebody who can give whenever they can, as much as they can, to whoever they can. But let me go through now a few basic halachas which come up in a regular day. Let's say we'll use an example of somebody going to shul, davening shacharis, mincha ma'ariv, and people come around the shul to collect money. Where exactly do we fall under this category of that I was mekayim the mitzvah properly, and where do we fall into the category that if I decide not to give him, so then maybe I will be transgressing this lav of leisa'amitz and leisikpoitz yodecha. So it starts like this. When a person comes into the shul and he's collecting for a certain cause, let's say, or for poor families, whatever the case may be, if he comes into the shul and just starts standing in the shul, and we know that he is there to collect and he's not part of our minyan to daven, the basic halacha is that when I am not approached by the specific ani, even though I see him in the shul and I know why he's here and I know he's about to give a speech and I know he's about to talk about what he wants to collect for, that does not obligate me that I have to give him. The real chiyuv when a person has to give is when the person gets approached by the ani himself. The ani comes to you and he says, "Here, I'm collecting for myself. I am a poor person and I need some help." That is the time where a person has a chiyuv to go and give if he has what he can give him, of course. Now, many times people ask, what exactly is this gather? I mean, sometimes it can be in shul and I don't have money on me. So what do I have to do? Do I have to go home and get money? Do I have to go and borrow money? So believe it or not, there is a discussion in the poskim. They talk about this, whether or not a person should go home and whether or not a person should go borrow money. But in all practical purposes, we come out la halacha lamaisa that being that most people aren't going to wait around, especially we're talking about somebody who's planning on giving maybe $1 or a quarter or $50, whatever the case is. So nobody has the time to really wait for a person to go and find the money, and also borrowing money is not always practical. If it is something which is very practical, so some people can go above the letter of the law and try to go get that mitzvah if they can, if it's easy for them, if they really feel like it's important, and it is important, but they want to be able to do it practically, and they shouldn't come to, get into debts or forget about paying back, etc. So in the big picture, a person has to remember that we're not exactly obligated to do this, going to our house to go and find another few coins or whatever. We don't have to do that because the person is not going to wait around. And therefore, like I said, the basic chiyuv and the way not to avoid not transgressing any lavim in the Torah is, of course, to be able to go and get approached by this person. And when the person is approaching you, that's when you have that chiyuv. That's when you should try to go and do the mitzvah. Many times I get asked all types of shilas in regards to this halacha. People want to know. They say, "Listen, I'm coming and I'm coming to shul. I have a big bill. I don't want to break the bill. I don't want this." And I always tell them like this: listen, breaking the bill is obviously something which is not an excuse to go and you don't want to walk around with a lot of change. Usually that's not the case. You're going to get so much change. But obviously if you're going to get a few extra bills and you don't want to crack 100, so I don't think that is an excuse that a person can go and say that he doesn't have to give tzedakah in such a case. Definitely, if you have a bill, you shouldn't go use an excuse that you don't want to have a broken bill into 20s or 10s or whatever the case may be. And therefore, whenever people ask that shayla, I always tell them that they should go and do something about it, which is to try to give tzedakah whatever they can. Another very important point over here in these halachas is that there are a few achronim that bring down, and also some of the Gedolei HaPoskim, they speak out that the whole halacha of a person being approached by an ani and giving that ani tzedakah, and if I turn my eye away from him, then I'm going to transgress a lav in the Torah. This whole idea is speaking about when the ani himself comes. And that's a very, very important thing to remember, because many times a person finds himself in shul, even in his house. A person can come to your house and they want to collect for a certain organization, and they're a gabbai. They're not the ani themselves. Many achronim point out that this whole idea of leisa'ametz and leisikpos, that whole idea of transgressing that lav only applies when the poor person comes himself and asks for the tzedakah. And if I turn away, then I transgress it. But if a gabbai comes around, so the halachas don't apply. It's very important to note that, because many times people who are collecting are not exactly the poor people themselves, but rather the gaboyim or different people who represent the organization. And therefore, it gets us out of a lot of questions, because we're a lot of times facing the gabbai, and that's it. Only the gabbai itself. Okay, well, I'm going to continue with Siyata D'Shmaya next week. We'll go through a few more halachas that are important about during davening, whether or not we have to go and give tzedakah while we're in the middle of davening, whether we're in the middle of learning, if we have to stop in the middle of learning, and what exactly we should do when somebody comes around. A few other practical halachas, and we're going to continue to go and swim through Siyata D'Shmaya, these great, great important things about the mitzvah of tzedakah, which we have tremendous amount of schar and so much bracha is waiting for each and every one of us who is mekayim this mitzvah properly. Have a great day. Thank you all for listening.